Good afternoon. My name is Ruben Valenzuela. I'm the Artistic Director of Bach, Collegium, San Diego. And welcome back to our ongoing series of interviews that we're doing with BCSD musicians and family and special guests. If you're just scrolling through, we do this every Wednesday at about 2 o'clock. And in fact, we do it at 2 o'clock most Wednesdays. And you'll want to keep in tune and touch to see who we have coming up next. Today, we're really excited to welcome into the broadcast studio, as it were, Aaron WESTMAN. Aaron WESTMAN serves as BCSD's principal violist. We'll talk about a little bit about that down the road here. Gosh, Aaron, I was thinking just the other day, you've been playing with BCSD now for quite some time. You could probably go back to 2008, 2009. Is that right?
Oh, even longer.
Even longer.
2006. I think it was October of 2006.
Oh my gosh! Yeah, right.
We played a Bach orchestral suite. I remember.
Right.
Maybe was it the first suite?
I think it. Yeah, it was suite number the major one. Yeah.
I remember. I think I carpooled down with Anne Raridan.
Oh my God! Yeah.
A lot of people that I knew from Musica Angelica, but with a new person who I never met before, and that's you.
Wow, yeah.
My grandmother was still alive. She lived in San Diego, and
yeah,
I have a lot of family in San Diego, so it's almost it's like home for me.
Right.
So I remember thinking like, I really hope something good happens of this.
Yeah, and when you say 2006, 2007, that to me is, in a way, that's like BCSD Stone Age.
Right.
It's like really reaching back into the vaults. But
Yeah.
Man, we're so glad to have you. And over the years, we've done some quite some exciting collaborations with you in the viola section. And but today we'll get to some BCSD things. One of the topics that I wanted to talk about is your amazing work with the ensemble that you lead, Agave Baroque. Agave Baroque. What is the website? Should people want to look that up as we're doing this interview? What is the website, Aaron?
AgaveBaroque.org.
.org. Okay. Yeah. One of the things that I've enjoyed about Agave Baroque, and you've always been so generous. Every time you guys do a recording, you give me a recording that then sits in my car for months and months as I enjoy it. You've always made it a point to record and serve underrepresented composers and or underrepresented musicians in the field of early music. And I think one recording that caught my attention early on was the music or the recording you did of Isabella Leonarda.
Yes.
That Queen of Heaven, I think, was the title of that. So can you tell us a little bit about just your interest in that area and as it pertains to early music specifically?
Well, there are a couple things. First of all, we tend to play, I mean, I'm saying we in a very general way, but on professional ensembles these days tend to play such a tiny fraction of the music that's out there that's ever been composed. And, it's not to say that, the music that goes around isn't amazing and moving, but I think it's really eye-opening and ear-opening to hear something by a composer maybe you had written off or never heard of, hear music from a different perspective. And you mentioned Queen of Heaven and Isabella Leonarda, who really just has a voice unlike anybody else. In some ways, it's very, typical 17th century Italian music in the best possible way. But there's also very much a voice in there that you don't get from old white man composers. And I think that's really important for people to hear and for us to celebrate and enjoy again and again.
Yeah, and the thing you just said about listening to it with a different perspective, that's so true, because I mean, like all fine music, I think it's absolutely important that you put it forth in the best way possible. I mean, I always relay the fact that when I first heard, Bach cantatas as one example, and they just happened to be very poor performances of it, I actually walked away not liking the music. And then when you hear a first-rate performance, it's a completely different language, and oftentimes you come across underrepresented music or composers of that sort, and the performances are not first-rate performances, and it leaves you with a very, very myopic sort of understanding of that music. So this wonderful thing that you guys have done, I think, has put a lot of this music into a better light, thankfully.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other tenet that I was going to mention there is that my co-director Henry Lebedinsky is just a photographic memory for underrepresented music, and a huge library of pieces that, many of which he's done his own editions of.
Right.
So often what happens is Henry will be like, let's do this piece, and he'll send like some edition that he just made, like 30 minutes ago. And I'll be like, I've never heard of this composer. Why would he want to do, it's like, I have to go through that in my brain.
Sure.
Like, how could it possibly be better than what we've already done, or something that we already know? There's so much good music out there. Why would we do bad music? And that is one of our criteria, is like, we really only try to do good music. We're not playing bad music, but there's a lot of good music that nobody plays.
Right.
So I have to go through that in myself too, because we all have those prejudices in our head, just from being trained and growing up in a world that's throws a lot of one type of thing at you.
Right. And at the top of the interview, we played a little snippet of a dear friend of ours, Reggie Mobley, singing a composer, David Pola, 17th century composer, if I'm not mistaken. And there's a name that doesn't really circulate around all that much. How did you find him?
Well, I believe that, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that one was in a collection, a library collection, Dubin collection. Yeah. So he's a composer who, there are a handful of his pieces floating around, and I had, heard maybe a sonata by him before, but none of us had really ever played much of him. So it's part of the fun, is to discover something that you just hadn't even considered before, and have it really move you. And even when you first start working on it, maybe you don't get it yet. You have to live with it. Right. You have to learn the language. You have to learn their voice, kind of come to know their voice.
Right.
And that's a challenge, and that's part of the fun of doing what we do.
Yeah, and of course, needless to say, I've always enjoyed the recordings and your collaborations with Reggie Mobley, because I say this all the time, and it came up with an interview, I think, with Maury Baker a couple of weeks ago, is that part of my music grab bag in my tool chest some years ago is my love for jazz and my love for improvisation and the idea of improvisation. And I remember connecting with Reggie for the first time. I think it was it was not the first time, but it was certainly the first time when he absolutely unleashed every possible, incredible ornament out of his tool chest. And we were doing "O Thou That Tellest Good Tidings" that, we've all heard a million times.
Yeah.
And he absolutely stopped me dead in my tracks. Never heard or even thought about it sounding that way. And it's just that spirit of improvisation that is so much connected to early music, as you know, that I just love that somebody like Reggie brings to the table. I mean,
that's one of the many, many things that we love about Reggie. And also he's just such a wonderful human being. And you can, this is one of the great disappointments in life, is that you'd like to think, as a musician who strives for goodness, at least, that to be a good musician, you should be a good person. And it's really just not true, unfortunately.
Right.
But Reggie is a truly good person, somebody who is engaged and active and emotional and just full of just brilliance. And he he comes from such a different background than me, and I love that we can come together and make incredible music come to life, and I feel very just so lucky every time. I met Henry and Reggie on the same gig back in 2009, I think, in Miami.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing Reggie for the first time open his mouth. He was wearing a pink shirt, and he opened his mouth and sang. We were doing Pergolesi's Stabat Mater and a new piece. And I remember thinking, why doesn't everybody know about him? And it's been kind of a wonderful pleasure to see him just rocket to the top. Over the years.
And we're going to have the plan is to get Reggie onto this interview series in a few weeks, because that'll be fun to talk about music and otherwise. But tell us about the recording. You did a recording with Reggie, A Piece of Our Time with Agape Baroque. Can you tell us about that project and how that came to be and how people find it?
We've actually done two. So Reggie is on the Leonardo recording.
Right, of course.
I mean, it's not that his voice type necessarily is the perfect voice for that repertoire so much as it is we just wanted to do a project with him and we combined.
Right.
Our second recording, as you mentioned, is Peace in Our Time, that came out in 2018, and that's where that Pola piece that you played comes from. And by the way, that video was made by Gary Payne. His own Gary Payne, amazing photographer.
And I think he's watching today, so we'll see if he.
Hi, Gary.
Yeah.
Lines getting pepper sprayed or pepper bombed.
Yeah.
At the moment. Anyway, so Peace in Our Time features music from the era of the 30 Years' War in the 17th century, 1619 to 1648, 49, I believe.
Wow.
And then the generation afterwards, which was so influenced by that period. And we primarily are featuring the composer Johann Christoph Bach. So there's an example of a composer who is, a famous name, but whose music is not well represented specifically. Right. And we don't have that much music of his, but everything that we have of his is incredible.
Yeah. Right.
So the 30 Years' War was an absolutely devastating, not only to human life, but that combined with bouts of the plague and famine, and it just it also destroyed the culture of the German-speaking countries in Europe. And so part of what is oddly appealing about music from that time period is that they just had to make up their own thing. They had to come up with, this is not something that was handed down from generation to generation so much as it is, picking sounds out of normal life, sounds of war,
right.
Sounds of bands of folk musicians in the countryside, sounds from church, and putting them all together, mashing them together in this kind of wonderful stream of consciousness, stilus fantasticus, as they call it. And it's like, to me, when I heard music, particularly, I mean, for me, the story really has to do with Heinrich Bieber, who's associated with that, maybe one generation later.
Right.
When I heard his music, I'm like, this is like heavy metal. This is like,
yeah,
this was the heavy metal of the 17th century.
Right.
And that's where my background came from. When I was like 12 years old, I had a heavy metal band. So,
you just before we came on live here, I said, I think one of the things I said was, "Oh my gosh, Aaron, I have your hair has always been long as I know you, but I have never seen it this long." And I said, "You're approaching Lully standards," and you said, "No, it actually is more of a of a like a rock sort of vibe going on that you've had since 16, 17. So you mentioned you had a band?
Yeah, I had a couple of bands in like junior high and high school. The first one was like kind of a heavy metal band.
Yeah, I could see that.
I'm not sure we were very good because I was attempting to be a guitarist at that point. It just didn't know. I was never a very good guitarist. And I just didn't know that you could play a string instrument in a band.
Yeah.
Then, then a few years later, a friend of mine, well, somebody who ended up becoming, and is still a very close friend of mine, asked me to join his band playing viola, of all things. He specifically wanted viola in his band.
Okay.
And he asked my stand partner first, and she couldn't do it for some reason. So then he sort of, maybe settled on me, and it was fun. We're all of us are professional musicians now, so we had a lot of fun.
I should have asked you a few minutes ago, but tell us how did you find early instruments and early music? What was your path?
It's funny. Like if you kind of look at it through the 2020 lens of history, it seems kind of obvious. My mom's a pianist and my dad is a historian. You put those two things together and you get historical performance. But that's not how it felt. To me, it was just kind of like a constant cycle of feeling like, okay, I'm a musician. That's who I am as an identity. But am I good enough? Can I, it's so competitive. I remember my dad saying to me, like, how are you going to make a living? My dad is so super supportive of music and loves it. Like, he was just concerned.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. And in my head, that voice keeps repeating, like, can you really do this? Are you really good enough? Do you love it enough to do it? Well, of course I love it, but it's like when I finally came around, and it wasn't really until graduate school. I mean, there was a moment in college. I did 1 year at the San Francisco Conservatory, and I had a friend who was a harpsichordist, and he sort of dragged me into lessons with Lorette Goldberg, who is just famous for converting people. And that's kind of the beginning.
Wow.
As I look back on it, also I realize I mentioned Bieber a minute ago. When I finally heard a recording of Bieber, I'm like, this is like Metallica. I mean, this is like the closest thing to capturing that sort of childhood spirit that playing in my high school band sort of.
So for somebody watching this right now, you mentioned a bit ago the term stilus fantasticus, and then you've back now describing this aesthetic as it pertains to Baroque music. Can you like quickly define for somebody who might be watching? Oh, he's now dropped that term twice, stilus fantasticus. What is that, and what does that mean? Because it sounds pretty compelling if Aaron Westman took it up.
I like to think of it as, it can mean a number of things, but the fantastical style literally, meaning not structured in a conventional sense, but structured in the sense that it's a mashup of defined styles. So, imagine you're sitting in church listening to an organist play something. I'm sorry, I know that this is a stereotype, but playing some very austere, serious church music. Not all church music is serious, but this is just, just for example, some very austere church music. And then suddenly you hear just out of the corner of your ear, you hear a folk fiddle player outside. The sound is wafting into the church, and it just kind of mixes with the church music for a second. And then you go back to the austere, back to the wild and crazy folk music. And then all of a sudden the folk players are in the church jamming with the organist.
Yeah.
And it becomes this wonderful, wild tussle. That's kind of the best way I can explain it.
Yeah, and as an organist, this is why I've always loved and adored the music of course, Buxtehude falls into that category a lot. Bruns, Nicholas Bruns, of that stuff. It's just, yeah, it just this exactly a mashup of styles, things that seemingly are left open-ended and unattended, not tied in a bow, but then they do come back and are brought back together. Which brings me to the next topic that I wanted to talk to you, and that was you mentioned something before even we came on about, and this pertains very much to current affairs, and this idea of musicians, when musicians come together, it being a microcosm of society in many, many ways, where you've got people coming from completely different backgrounds, contexts, lenses. Can you speak to that a little bit, in that sense, music as healing?
Yeah, I've actually been thinking very specifically about BCSD lately, as we're watching the just day after day of dysfunctional news coming in. I mean, literally attacking the media. But I've been thinking about BCSD in the sense that music collaboration is a very complicated thing. There's so much social skill, sort of governmental theory going on in there. Maybe that's not the best way to describe it, but it is a microcosm of a society and of a government. And an orchestra, the typical modern orchestra in our society now is one of the most hierarchical constructs.
Right.
With a sort of authoritarian, the old school model of the authoritarian conductor. Of course, that's not always true anymore, but
right.
You have, principal players and, very regimented and a chain of command, and nobody talks unless they're, in a leadership position.
God forbid you have a musical opinion.
Right. God forbid you have a musical opinion. Your opinion doesn't matter if you're sitting in the second violin section, or even second chair or third chair in a section. And I couldn't articulate this when I was a younger person, but I never really wanted to be a part of that so much. And so to relate this to what you were talking about before, finding early music, finding historical performance, it captured that chamber music spirit that I've always been drawn to, of collaboration, of democracy, and finding BCSD and being involved with it as it's developed and grown into this incredible, wonderful thing, really has opened my eyes, and I think a lot of other people's eyes, to how it can work. It can be just absolutely magical when you have that perfect blend of people working together, a leader, you, Ruben, who is not an authoritarian so much as somebody who has surrounded himself with people he trusts. And everybody has something different to bring to the table. And sometimes it seems like magic that it just comes together, because we all play together in a number of different groups, and it doesn't seem to work that well all the time. It's just the right balance of chemistry. And you can really think about how, or one can really think about how in our society, we're striving for that right balance of having everybody's voices be heard and be respected and be a relevant part of a society, and with leaders who understand and want to hear everybody's voice. And it just seems so elusive these days. And so I really, this is not hagiography at all. This is I finally feel that BCSD has that perfect balance, and I'd love to capture it in a bottle and bring it everywhere. And I hope that when we play music, that people get some of that.
You just reminded me of something, and again, this importance of everyone's voice being heard. I can't think of all. There's been so many times throughout the years where typically you are, to my most of the time, not always, but you're right to my right if I'm sitting at a podium. And I remember a few years ago, it was early on in our Messiah run, and you said to me, I think we were doing, it was the recitative, Thy Rebuke, that accompagnato. And you said, the violas have this, they're the only ones that have this downbeat in bar X, I don't remember what it is. And I said, and it is, and when we play in that moment, there's an incredible harmony that is produced. That until that moment, I was frankly oblivious to it. I was probably worrying more about the singer lining up with the overall structure. And ever since then, I think if I'm, as you know, every time we get to that moment in that recitative, I look over at you, you smile, you kind of give a wink, and we connect on that. And there are other moments like that. I can think of even the Symphonia or the Overture of Messiah. There's this wonderful dotted rhythm that the violas do first before the rest of the band does it, and it's just, I've grown to just look. Oh, Aaron's going to glance. He's going to smile, and when I see that smile, you know, it like you said, it's trust, right? It tells me, my gosh, it's trust. Like, you got my back, I got your back. We all have each other's back. Like, we can do pretty risky things musically up here, and it's going to be okay. And it's because everybody's voice is trying to be heard and negotiated in real time sometimes, which is the exciting bit about not just what BCSD does, but, you know, when an ensemble is able to do that, that's when magic happens in my book, when you're able to respond in real time to these different perspectives going on. But anyway, maybe you have some other examples of those wink moments of like, oh, there goes Aaron.
Well, I was thinking of that very one that you mentioned first. That's such a wonderful moment. You know, another weird thing is that as a violist, as a Baroque violist, it kind of requires a certain kind of patience and a little bit of an experienced skill set. And, you know, playing Messiah wouldn't normally be a highlight of someone's season as a professional Baroque violist. But I love playing that piece with BCSD every year because it feels fresh. And there are little moments like that that are just, that viola part is so weird and angular. It's almost a tone row, actually, that one resonance in the viola part. And it's just, you know, in the context of the whole thing, just to see how Messiah has developed over the years for BCSD, I never feel like it's a chore or a task to have to play it again.
And the truth from my perspective is that, you know, when we make the decision, well, we never really made officially the decision. We're going to do it every year. It so happened that, oh, let's do it again. And every year, including this very last December when we did it last, which December to me now feels like 10 years ago that we were able to be together in the same room. But even that one, you know, I tend to go in with it. Oh, it's somewhat of a chore, but the minute I have, you know, the BCSD family in front, and we're making music like that again, like I could, you know, it's just like, of course, like I'm happy to do this in any piece, because of that freshness and that, for lack of a better term, you know, like there's a certain risk taking that I find exhilarating, that I like, and I think it, again, goes back to this ability to negotiate and listen to everyone's perspectives bouncing around in the room as it goes. A lot of people may not know this, but, you know, it's like you are an incredible violinist. When you said it demands a bit of patience on your part, you know, especially I'm immediately thinking of all those wonderful, you know, early Handel oratorios where the violas are sitting around. But oftentimes, you know, you have been known to bring your other axe, right? The violin. Which one do you like when it comes down to it? Which one do you prefer to play if you had to make a choice?
Playing both. I mean, you know, I think I probably have more of a violist personality than a violinist personality, but you know, especially for certain repertoire, I just love playing violin. I probably do about 50-50 now. But there are certain groups that I exclusively play viola in, and I think it's important to have a role and to feel like you're valued in that role. And so I think I've always been happy being 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 violist in BCSD and I play viola in Philharmonia Baroque only, and it requires a certain mindset that is very different from violin. Any violinist can pick up a viola and make a sound on it, but
right.
you'd think, okay, well, so the parts are not as flashy or as complicated or as notey as on the violin. The violin parts, like in Messiah, is a perfect example, or any Handel oratorio for that matter. Yeah. But it's much easier to just be playing the melody all the time than to have to manage your concentration and figure out who you're playing with and what role you're playing at any given time, which is constantly changing when you're a violist. So.
And that was one of the, when we did Brandenburg's last fall, that was fun to see you, take that role, not so much as like, okay, I'm buried in the texture, but really, I don't know about you, but I have often thought of what Bach was trying to make a point with Brandenburg 6, like exalting the so-called lowly,
Well, he really did. I mean, for being such a, the mainstream composer of all mainstream composers, he really did champion color, in the sense that, turning things like searching for that old style. I think we were talking about Stilus Fantasticus and Buxtehude earlier. And I think he's sort of searching for that old sound. And one way to achieve that is to kind of turn things on their head using instruments like the d'amore, viola d'amore, the oboe d'amore, and the viola da gamba for those special moments in the Passions. The heart center of both St. John and St. Matthew Passion is a viola da gamba solo. And according to C.P. Bach, he did often lead his group from the viola.
That's right.
Perhaps because, the viola is playing a motoric role in the middle. Perhaps because, he didn't have to concentrate so hard on playing like violin solos or something. I don't know. I mean, you can only speculate, but his Bach viola parts are always good. There's Handel's a different story. Handel writes, incredible bass lines, incredible melodies, right. And then the viola is sort of like filling in the harmonies, not often with a sense for line, and that's what's one of the challenges of playing Handel.
Right, and when you say Bach and viola parts, of course, I immediately think of the early Bach, when he's still very much functioning in a 17th century old school way. I'm thinking of course, the cantata that most people know pretty well, Priestlag and Todesbanden, with that incredible texture of the two violas, and things like that. But going back to Brandenburg 6, again, what's interesting about his use of viola da gamba there is that, oftentimes you have these associations of the da gamba being this court instrument, this French court instrument with ties to, royalty and so forth. And here in Brandenburg 6, he literally subjugates that idea down to, the gambas, oftentimes, just playing, motivic, repeated notes, which I've always found very comical, with the violas on top, of course. And I've always wondered, what is Bach trying to say in that texture with the way he's chosen to use the violas and the violas da gamba? I don't know.
Well, I mean, he went out of his way to try to say something.
Yeah.
He could have said a lot of things, but he specifically chose to make it the weirdest ensemble imaginable.
Same thing with 2, where it's like, really, you're really going to put a trumpet alongside a recorder? I mean, what are you thinking? You're ridiculous. Yeah. But it's he's literally, and again, I don't know if it might be a stretch, but I would like to think that Bach at some point in there is trying to make a statement that these disparate instruments, these instruments that may not on the surface appear as though they should be together or playing together or collaborating together, can be brought in to collaborate and have a voice and make a coherent idea. So this is always something that has captured my imagination as it pertains to the specifically to the Bach Brandenburgs. And of course, he does this in the cantatas all the time. The cantatas being sort of a laboratory. I always think of the cantatas as like a Bach laboratory. He's just trying things, and of course, sometimes on a much bigger scale, with moments in either the B minor Mass or the Passions and that sort of thing. What is your you mentioned Handel? What is your go-to, like if you're playing viola, what is your go-to Handel oratorio to limit it to that?
I love Resurrezione, which we did maybe 5 years ago. I mean, I guess it's not really an oratorio, but Dixie Dominus. I love his early stuff from when he was
of course,
working with Corelli's orchestra. I mean, just to imagine Corelli in a cloud of rosin dust there, and Handel, the young Handel. I mean, that's just, it doesn't get any better than that.
No, it does not get better. You're absolutely right about that. And if I'm not mistaken, Dixie Dominus. Gosh, yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, because that too has two viola parts, does it not?
It does have two viola parts. Yes.
Yeah.
Also Acis and Galatea, also maybe not really, typical necessarily, but that's just like I feel like that's the perfect opera or mini opera or oratorio.
Right. Now outside the world of quote unquote classical music, what does Aaron Westman listen to? What are your go-tos like?
Well, I love 70s rock and jazz. So when I was a very, very, very little kid, my parents had a collection of LPs, and I'm not sure if it's even that they listened to them so much, but it just happened to be what I listened to when I was a little kid. Kind of British rock bands like Procol Harum, the prog rock band, and I had a babysitter who had a big collection of Police records.
Oh wow! Yeah.
And so I listened to a lot of the Police when I was a little kid. So I feel like that sort of very much shaped who I am as a musician, my musical identity. In high school, my bandmates introduced me to Steely Dan, and I just they're my favorite band in the whole world.
Wow. Okay.
So, and I can't say I listen to a ton of heavy metal anymore, but I was a big Alice in Chains fan.
Oh, right.
With younger, and Megadeth and Metallica, and later on, Black Sabbath, and of course the British rock bands from the 70s, Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and all them. But so I would say nowadays I primarily I love jazz because it shares something similar with what we do, but it's so different, such a different language.
Right.
So I tend to listen to Weather Report, Wayne Shorter, Jaco Pastorius, those guys, maybe a generation after Miles Davis. I love Miles Davis too. I'm a huge Miles Davis fan.
All right, so you like 70s jazz then?
Yes.
Aha.
Frank Zappa, and so I have to say I've been kind of quaking in my boots all day because I listened to your interview with Maury, and he just after this epic, playing with Janis Joplin and was that Sly and the Family Stone who was on?
Right.
And then suddenly, and right at the last minute, he's and then Zappa comes out and he's like, "You got to play the set with us tonight." And I'm like, how can anybody outdo that? I think Zappa is one of the most brilliant musicians of the 20th century.
Yeah. So another one of your passions, I know, is brewing. Tell us about that. Yeah. How you came to find that interest in that, and what you're currently doing with that.
Well, I think brewing beer, and it's ironic because we moved last year, and I've been fixing up our house, and so I haven't brewed in a while. But brewing is the most wonderful kind of combination of a mad science experiment and cooking and creating your own recipe, bringing in fresh ingredients from a variety of places or from one particular location. Um, and I'm also like really into coffee. I roast coffee.
Right.
And I think both of those are kind of like, just fun things to that connect so much um, in the world. Like you have to learn about like where did this grain come from, and how is it different if you change like the same type of grain grown in one country or in one farm versus another one. And there's so much like science and complexity and wonder in it. It's kind of it's a kind of like a musical experiment, but that's not music. So it's refreshing with difference.
Yeah.
And then at the end, you get to enjoy a delicious brew.
Do you come up with some fun and interesting names for your creations?
Oh, yeah, but I usually feel like I'm not very good at that.
Yeah. I
get inspired. Yes.
Yeah, I've seen people who also do brewing come up with these like incredible, very well planned out names. Everything from opus lists to names specifically for their creations. But you mentioned you're working on your house. Where are you? You're at home today.
Well, I live in the other brewing mecca, other than San Diego, and that's Santa Rosa, which is now
Santa Rosa, right?
Yeah, we've become like a hub for brewing. Ironically, it also happens to be where I grew up. So so we Anna Washburn, my wife, who also plays violin with BCSD, and I bought this house up here in Santa Rosa last year, and we could only afford to buy a major fixer-upper, so I sort of just had to figure out how to do everything. And so with the help of some friends and colleagues who are really into that, and a contractor friend who kind of got us started, we've just been going for it. So yeah, we've just been doing project after project. Being stuck at home has been, weirdly good for that.
Yeah.
Because what else are we going to do?
I think there was a
aren't going to happen.
Yeah, early on when we were, into this lockdown thing, there was I think you may have posted the picture, maybe it was Anna. I think there was a big hole in your house. Like you had carved out a big hole, and I thought, oh my gosh, I really hope Aaron knows what he's doing. I hope he knows how to put that up.
Not really. I mean, yeah, yes and no.
Yeah.
I will say that's the first time I drill, cut a hole in the wall. So, but it worked out okay.
It worked out okay. How old is the house that you guys have?
It's almost 80. It's 80 this year. It's 1940.
Awesome. Yeah, those are fun. They take some work, but they're a lot of fun because they have character.
Character. So that's what it's all about. I've been finding this theme in my life, looking back, that like it's all about character.
It's all about and I'm admiring the built-in bookshelf behind you. Is that part of that?
That was one of many fun built-in features.
I love that,
including the door. You can see the doorbell behind.
The chimes, right?
And then this is the window that one of the windows that we put in. That's the one where we saw the video heading on.
That was the hole I saw.
Exactly.
Amazing. Yeah. I would have. Yeah, I'm not very handy with things of that sort. I would be like petrified to make a hole of that size in a house, because I probably have to call somebody to come and fix it after. I didn't know what to do. But well, Aaron, it's been, gosh, what a joy, and so much fun to catch up. We last saw each other in person in December, which now feels like a long time ago, as I said, and it's good to catch up. Do you have anything else you want to add or say?
Well, I was, earlier you were talking about the projects we've been doing with Reggie, and I did not get to. I would be remiss if I didn't mention. We're because of everything being canceled and everybody stuck at home, we decided to bump up a project and make a third recording with Reggie. This is something we'd already planned on doing, but it feels particularly relevant in the current moment. And as I think we were talking about this before we went on, that like, we didn't go into any of these projects thinking like we're going to do something, because of current events necessarily. But it is always relevant, I think, to do music that's underrepresented and to work on composers who are underrepresented. And this one happens to be extremely relevant to the current events. It's called American Originals, and we are featuring all composers from the Americas and the U.S., all composers of color. Everyone from Manuel de Sumaya from Mexico, Esteban Salas, who's a Black Cuban composer, amazing composer, who it's like, he's another composer. I'm looking, Henry sent us a couple of pieces and I'm thinking, like, can this really, blow my ears off? And sure enough, it did.
Sure enough, yeah.
Jose Mauricio Nunez Garcia, a Black Brazilian composer. And then we're going to do some Scott Joplin, not necessarily the composer we were setting out to specialize in when we started Agave, but my goodness, he wrote some unexpectedly, I shouldn't even say unexpectedly, but he wrote some incredibly heartfelt and different music than what you would expect the composer of The Entertainer and the Maple Leaf Brags to have written. And then a whole set by Florence Price, who's been getting some delayed attention recently for very good reason. Reggie is hoping to record most or all of her music, and so we're working on some arrangements for our group to do. We just performed the program, the earliest version of the program in January, and on the Arizona Early Music Society series, and it was really fun. But we didn't have all of the arrangements ready at that point, so we're kind of working on that for a summer project. And we want to do some video as well to go along with the album, so that people have something to enjoy while we're stuck at home and not going to live concerts.
Yeah, right. So. And I want to be sure that everybody that's heard you today remark upon these recordings can go get them today. And it's agavebaroque.org. Did I get that right?
That's right.
Okay. And if you go there, if I'm not mistaken, you can go on the tab that says media or recordings, and they can access those recordings and get them that way. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a discography tab for ordering, and then you can also kind of sample everything on the media or on the programs tab. I'm sorry. The programs tab has like information about. It's a little bit out of date, but it has all of our albums that are available for purchase.
Right. So do go check that out. agavebaroque.org. You can find out more about Aaron's work with the ensemble and some of this repertoire that we've been discussing. Aaron, thank you again for your time today. I really appreciate it. And we will hopefully meet up again and do some live music, hopefully sooner rather than later. Who knows at this point, to be quite honest. But I do know that I always look forward to those moments that I already commented on, where you make it absolutely known that this viola lick needs to be heard. Over at you.
Well, I just think that composers didn't write music that they didn't want to hear. So
there you go. There you go.
So anyway, thank you so much, Ruben. It has been a real pleasure to do this.
Absolutely. And next week, if you have been following the series, be sure to check in next Wednesday. We have another special guest and somebody who goes back to goes back to the even pre-BCSD times, and that's my friendship and collaborative time with Amy Wang. Amy Wang is Amy Wang.
Amy. Oh boy.
Next Wednesday, you won't want to miss that one. I know she looks forward to these interviews every Wednesday. Now the table will be turned, and we'll be talking to Amy to see what she has to say about life at the moment. So,
all right.
Yeah. So Aaron, thank you so much. We'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks, Ruben.
Take care. Bye.